Hello and welcome back to Diddy on Trial from the BBC World Service YouTube channel with me, Anoushka Mutanda-Dougherty. Make sure you subscribe so you never miss a thing. Now, it's Wednesday and week 6 in the trial of Sean Diddy Combs. Before we get into everything, a reminder. He's charged with sex trafficking, transportation for prostitution and racketeering with conspiracy, known as RICO. These are charges he's consistently denied. So today we were expecting the final couple of witnesses for the prosecution, particularly Brendan Paul, he's Diddy's former assistant. But it didn't really go to plan. One of the jurors has called in sick and Judge Subramaniam decided to adjourn for the day. So today we're going to have our weekly roundup episode. You'll be hearing from resident criminal defence attorney Shaun Kent later. But right now I'm here in the BBC New York bureau chatting to the BBC New York correspondent Nada Tawfik. Hi, Nada.
Hey, Anoushka.
So, Nada, there's no court today. Tell me about what happened in more detail.
Yeah, a juror on the way into court got vertigo. And so the judge decided, since the juror was sick, to just give everyone the day off and to regroup on Friday, because Thursday is a federal holiday in the United States. So what it means is that while we thought prosecutors might, wrap their case Friday, earliest it will be now is Monday.
Yeah, so much for the whole we're going to have a verdict by the end of next week, because didn't Diddy's defense come out and say it will only take them 2 to 5 days to put on the case?
Yeah, that's right. And that was a big kind of question. Will Diddy take the stand? What other witnesses might the defense call? This new timeline of 2 to 5 days really does suggest that Diddy might not take the stand, because remember how long Cassie and Jane were there. But look, this isn't that unusual. Defense isn't the one here having to prove its case. The government has that burden. And so the defense really is just going to use this to put on any other points they want to make, but perhaps they're feeling confident enough at this stage.
But it hasn't been without its drama in typical fashion of the Diddy trial. There's been some other issues with jurors?
That's right. Let's not forget that we've had juror number 6 dismissed. And this was a big back and forth between the prosecution and the defense. What happened was, this is one of the black male jurors, and he had said that he lived in the Bronx. Remember, you have to be, a resident of New York to serve on a jury, in a trial that took place in this city. And so the juror apparently told a court official that he was actually staying in New Jersey with his fiance. And so it got a bit convoluted, his story. Now, the judge, kind of going through that, found that the inconsistencies were alarming enough that he said he would just take the juror off and replace him with an alternate, a white man. Now, Diddy's lawyers really complained about this, saying that the court was confusing inconsistencies with lying, that they fully believed he would be able to look at the facts and follow directions, saying he's awake more than some of the other jurors, and also saying that it could harm Diddy's ability to get a racially diverse jury. But the judge shot that down, saying that that's not Diddy's right here, and that you can't really put the genie back in the bottle, that he didn't feel the juror was forthcoming, and this was the best course of action.
Yeah, so that was juror number 6, but now they're talking about juror number 7. And then there are these other issues about sealed information.
We have a lot coming up in between, witnesses in court with these discussions. There's now the discussion that juror number 7, that he may have had conversations about the case with a colleague. And so the judge basically cleared the courtroom to talk to juror number 7. We're waiting to see how that pans out. And the jury must be wondering what's happening themselves, because even with juror number 6, they're not allowed to discuss that. They're not allowed to kind of discuss amongst themselves what happened there. They just have to be kind of left in the dark and focused on the evidence in this case and doing their job. But that's why there's alternates. Now, separately, the judge also was just irate and very upset with the defense and prosecution, saying that one of them was lying because leaked information was out in an online article from what should have been sealed court proceedings. Remember, we're in there, we're witnessing things, but occasionally private information is meant for just the two parties and the judge. And the judge was very concerned that this information had been leaked, and he threatened both sides with criminal contempt if this happens again.
And that's been the drama around the court proceedings. But the person we've actually had on the stand is somebody called a summary witness. Now, first of all, what is that?
So it's literally somebody who organizes this voluminous amount of evidence quite literally into a summary so that the jury can understand it. It's understanding complex information like hotel bookings and travel logs and text messages and putting that all together in a way that the jury can understand. Because remember, when they go and have their verdict sheet, they're going to have to say, has the government really proven the case that, Diddy paid for example, or the company, these escorts to fly across state lines? Did he really book their hotel rooms? Did he really, get employees to help? So all of this is a way to put that summary in front of the jury in a clean way from somebody who went through all the evidence.
And we know in this case there's so much evidence because we knew there were terabytes of data recovered from digital devices. And some of that stuff we've seen before. It's come up again with the summary witness, particularly messages from Cassie.
Yeah, and this is reinforcing a lot of the timeline and what was happening with Cassie, text messages between her and Diddy where she's organizing or booking the male escorts. There was one moment where, again, this photo of her with a big gash in her eyebrow was shown, and it was in the context of messaging Diddy to say, just so you remember, and he said, I'm sorry, exclamation point, exclamation point. So reinforcing just that whole timeline with Cassie and her conversations about what hotels and when, and kind of connecting that with the bookings so that the jury could understand what evidence had been provided by the government to support that.
Yeah, and it does make sense because it feels like a lifetime ago that Cassie was on the stand. We had another focus on Jane's messages as well. But really, the end of it was a heavy focus on Kristina Khorram. Now, Nada, for the uninitiated, who is Kristina Khorram?
Yeah, Kristina Khorram is Diddy's chief of staff, and her name has come up again and again throughout this trial. And there was even talk at one point about whether she was also going to be given immunity to come testify. But here we are toward the end of the prosecution's case, and she's not taking the stand. But what we have noticed is that the groundwork has clearly been laid to present these text messages in court. And Kristina Khorram is somebody who crossed over with not just Cassie, but also Jane, who was much later in this alleged criminal conspiracy and was dating Diddy right up until his arrest. So she's somebody who really knows the ins and outs of his company and his personal life. And that was really evidenced by some of the text messages she had with some of the personal assistants, where, they described, Diddy being active and ready to go, and her asking if it meant he was going to be having a Gucci night or a King's night. And it was interesting to see at one point they put forward messages directly between Kristina Khorram and Diddy in November of 2023, so after Cassie's lawsuit, in which you see her expressing concern that he's not being completely forthcoming with her. And in that exchange, and I'll just read you some of it, she tells him, if you can't be honest with me, this doesn't work. We all know what your kryptonite is and where you don't make the best choices. At that point, she says she feels like Diddy's lying to her and it's not sitting well with her. And he says, well, you can come take my phone. You can come kind of look for yourself. And she says, if you start lying to me, that it will break me. So Kristina Khorram has always been a central figure in this, and this was the chance we got to finally see some of her perspective.
We heard some of those messages that were speaking directly to the charge of transportation for prostitution. There's messages between Kristina and a staff member kind of giggling about spotting a cowboy in the lobby of a hotel. Nada, what's a cowboy?
Yeah, so we've heard that Diddy liked to book escorts from the service called Cowboys and Angels. And it's interesting because when we heard from the personal assistants, we heard a lot about the brutal work environment and how they were expected to transport drugs and make sure, copious amounts of baby oil and other items were always on deck and ready for the hotels. But you always wondered, did they fully know everything going on? And here they are joking about spotting, a cowboy in the lobby of the company and just saying they looked very much like an escort in that moment. So jokes about Diddy's personal habits they're very clearly laid out between Kristina Khorram and his personal assistants.
But the next person we have taking the stand is Brendan Paul. Nada, tell me a little bit more about Brendan.
So Brendan Paul is a 26-year-old Syracuse University basketball player, and he was a former personal assistant of Diddy's. And the reason his name and kind of his nickname as the drug mule of Diddy's has come up is because when Diddy's homes were raided, Brendan Paul was arrested that same day. He was arrested actually at the Miami airport and charged with cocaine possession. And we were just about to get into his testimony before this juror was sick, but he was given immunity. And so now when we get back to court, he will be testifying and we'll hear what he has to say.
So he's one of the last witnesses for the prosecution, then we have a summary witness, and then we're really in the home straight. Nada, thank you so much for breaking this down for us.
Absolutely.
That was the BBC's New York correspondent, Nada Tawfik. Now it's time to catch up with our resident criminal defence attorney, Shaun Kent. I spoke to him on Tuesday night, where we answered some of your questions.
Hey, how are you doing?
Shaun, in the past week, there have been a variety of different issues cropping up. We know about juror number 6, who's been dismissed. We're hearing about issues with juror number 7. And then we have information from a sealed conversation between the judge, the prosecution and the defence making its way into an online article. Now, I understand issues with the jurors. That's why we have alternates. But this sounds, to me, at least with little experience, sealed information getting out there sounds like a really, really big issue.
It is and it isn't, okay? It is in that, candidly, it's just going to make a judge upset. You have violated his rules of court. The judge is saying the sanctity of our meetings when we have these private meetings should not get out. Basically, the judge is saying, y'all have made me angry, and for this reason, I can hold any of you in contempt of court. I don't think there's any chance of a mistrial for that issue. The reason being, it doesn't hurt Shaun Combs' trial, his right to fairness. It more affects the judge's ability to control his court.
He's pulled Mark Agnifilo, lead counsel for Diddy's defence, and then lead counsel for the prosecution, Maureen Comey, and into a room and said, basically, on your heads be it. It's your job to make sure this doesn't happen, and I'm going to do an investigation, and when I find out where it came from, I'll hold one of you in contempt of court. Is that enough for the bar to get involved?
If the bar believes that you have done something to hurt Mr. Combs' ability to get a fair trial, yes, they will get involved. I doubt it is this. This is more of a judge saying, I'm going to utilize my contempt powers because you have violated my order. And in his contempt powers, he can put them in jail or he can order a fine. Those are the two big things that he can do.
And then the other question is, with juror number 6 being dismissed, and I've seen a lot of US stations saying, well, are they going to give an interview? Are they? I don't think it's illegal for them to give an interview. But if they came out and they were like, wink, wink, we all think he's guilty, that's unfair to Diddy.
The only thing that the juror 6 could do that could cause a new trial, if he said something during the jury when they were in the room, if he said, look, while we were in the room, we were discussing this trial like crazy and we all thought blank. That could get him a new trial. Or if a court of appeals later looks and they said, Judge, you impermissibly removed juror number 6. This was not the right thing to do. It happened on a case that I actually had. There was a banker. He had a trial. He was convicted. He was found guilty. The Court of Appeals, Federal Court of Appeals, found that the judge impermissibly removed a juror and they gave this guy a new trial.
Donaldson, who's a member of the defence, went very hard, saying, you know, he turns up on time. He made a comment saying juror number 6 is active participant, writing in his notes, and he's awake compared to some of the other jurors. Some have been spotted nodding off. So I guess that might be something that they bring up if there is a conviction at an appeal.
100%. The real question is candor to the tribunal. And so what the judge was saying is that juror was not honest with me. And since this juror was not honest with me, I believe that they wanted to get on the jury. And because of the way they answered their questions, I believe they went out of the way to get on my trial. I don't trust them. I want them gone. I think of all the crazy stuff that's happened in the trial, the wild part is juror number 6 could be the issue if there is a conviction why this man could get a new trial, potentially.
Just out of interest, if you have noticed members of the jury nodding off, I mean, they are long days, could the defence team not point over and say, well, juror number 5 is asleep, so there's no way in hell Diddy's getting a fair trial because they're missing chunks of the evidence?
We had a trial once, it was quite some time ago, and I'll never forget, we were sitting in a trial and one of the jurors had fallen asleep. And so the prosecutor not jokingly, but very seriously went trying to be all secretive to the judge and said, Your Honor, and this is while the prosecutor was talking, Your Honor, juror number 4 has fallen asleep. And the judge, without missing a beat, says, you put him asleep, you wake him up. And so that's candidly the issue. It's just like, if you're the one who put the jury asleep, that's on you. So just falling asleep, not paying attention, it's hard to get a juror thrown off for that. And if they're being boring, that's on them.
Well, look, I've got to ask you about these summary witnesses. They were on the stand. The one today was on in cross-examination for ages. We didn't get to Brendan Poole, who we were expecting. I mean, we were talking ages ago about the smoking gun that the prosecution might have at the end and kind of going out with a bang, not a whimper. It's not quite the end of the prosecution I was expecting. Why are they allowing what is the relevance of the summary witnesses?
I hate this rule. It's a federal rule. It's 1006. It's called the summary rule. And basically, the summary rule allows you that if there is too much information, then the judge and the courts will allow one witness to come and basically summarize these terabytes of information. So that's the whole point. And so the government can get all of their evidence out without the need of calling people. Problem is, one, I believe, it violates what's called the confrontation clause. Confrontation clause is guaranteed by the United States Constitution that you have the right to confront your accuser. If somebody is talking trash about me and says Shaun has done something, I have a right to look them dang in their face and say, you tell me what you said, don't talk about me behind my back. That's just common sense. That's what we do as normal people. I don't want someone to talk about my back without me with the right to defend myself. That's the problem with summary witnesses. And two, this is not necessarily evidence that's in evidence. They're just bringing stuff up. And that's often a problem that people have with it. As from the defense standpoint, a lot of times juries don't pay attention because it's so dang boring and it's not a real witness. So it cuts both ways.
But it doesn't really feel like we're going to go out with some explosive testimony from the prosecution.
I wouldn't count that just yet. There's a reason they're stopping with Brendan Paul. You understand? There is a reason. I don't know what the reason is. I'm still giving that prosecution the benefit of doubt, but they usually stop with their strongest witness that they can be able to control.
And then the other big thing is the defense coming out and saying it could take us 2 to 5 days to put on their defense, which, I mean, to me was like crazy because this man's freedom, is at stake from their perspective. But you were saying to me the other day that they didn't even necessarily need to put on a defense at all.
I'm shocked it's going to take 2 to 5 days. If I was dealing with this case from what I've seen right now, I wouldn't put a single witness on because you're not required to. In the U.S. system, you are innocent until proven guilty. You do not have to say a word. They have the burden of proof to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. That's not all doubt, but beyond a reasonable doubt. And you can say you can literally regurgitate the defense's opening. All they have proved is that Diddy is really a bad person and guilty of domestic violence, but this is not RICO. This is not sex trafficking. That could be it. Because my fear is, what witness will the defense be able to call to say that this is not blank? And so at some point in time, it's just like, why are you calling people just to call them? Because they're clearly, and we talked about last week, not putting Diddy on the stand. It ain't happening, which means they like the way the defense has gone. I don't know who the witnesses are, but it'll have to be some pretty interesting witnesses to justify putting on a case.
Now, this is a quick fire question from WhatsApp. It's just about the new juror, the alternate that switched in. Will they have heard evidence given in the 5 previous weeks? If they haven't, why don't they have to start the case again? I'm pretty sure the alternates are in there all the time.
They pick all the juries at the same exact time. They're all sitting in the courtroom. They tell them at the very beginning, you're an alternate, but if something happens to anyone else, you're in there. So they're watching everything. They're told to pay attention to everything at all points in time.
And then another one is, why are we able to hear snippets of the voice notes sent from Diddy to Jane, some of the stuff that was entered into evidence in the media, but we can't see all of the evidence? Everything isn't released.
It'll be released eventually. This is just what they put inside of the court system. It's just the way that the federal procedures are. So I can't give you a good reason.
Apart from that, under seal, right? Because the videos they're watching, we're never...
Yeah, a lot of stuff is under seal. Some stuff is not important.
We've got a voice note for you, Sean.
Ooh! Like a trivia question.
I used to be, for a time, a criminal defence lawyer in the UK. The American system is, in part, very different to ours, both original and creative, and at times bafflingly strange. I don't know if it's come up in Diddy's trial, but I've never understood the instruction from the judge to the jury to disregard what they have just heard. They may understand they can't take it into account when reading their verdict, but they can't unhear it. So it will be in their minds whether they want it to or not.
I truly wish that I could disagree with that caller, but I agree 1000%. The American system can be quite baffling. The only way that we can think about it is the judge does tell people that you must disregard, because let's think about it this way. Here's the easiest way to think about it. If we couldn't simply say, disregard what you just heard and say, let's start over, every lawyer on the planet, when the case is going badly, would say things that you're not supposed to hear, and then you would keep retrying the case over and over again. So judges have to utilize their discretion and make a determination that sometimes mistakes are made. And if a mistake is made and it was not intentional, and that's our theory, if it is not intentional to hurt the trial, then the judge can tell the jury, your job is not to listen to this evidence. That's it. It happens a lot of times.
And we've got another one from Shanice in Bristol. Oh, this is the question. Like most people, I was expecting Kristina Khorram to testify with the prosecution. Is it possible for the prosecution to bring Kristina out to testify during their rebuttal after the defense's case? How does the rebuttal process work in federal cases like Diddy's trial?
Absolutely possible, but to be a rebuttal, it must be in rebut to something the defense has put forth, okay? So Diddy's team has specifically said they are calling 3 witnesses. If the government wanted to rebut, they could rebut those ones. So here's the easiest way to describe it. Let's say, for argument's sake, Diddy puts forth an expert that talks about the fact that freak-offs are normal. Everybody does a freak-off, and all of these people are consenting to them. Well, then the government could recall their expert to specifically rebut what the defense has said. But that's it. You just cannot call a witness just because you feel like it. I think he has mentioned that the defense is possibly calling other employees of Bad Boy, Combs Entertainment, and things of that nature. Under that situation, maybe they could recall Kristina Khorram to rebut some of the stuff that they were saying. But make sure you understand, it must be to rebut what the defense is saying, which is another reason why I'm not a fan of putting on a case, because you don't know what you're possibly opening the door for the prosecution to say about you.
And the last question, which I thought was such a good one, came from Jade on Instagram as well. We spoke about this a little bit. The name Young Miami can be thrown around, but the rapper in Vegas who is allegedly having a sort of swinging party thing that Jane attends, their name can't be mentioned, and that was ruled by the judge. Why is it different for one celebrity as compared to the other?
The reason that question is so good is we always talk about appellate issues. The exact thing you have just said is what a court of appeals will be looking at later. And they will ask that exact question. Why can you let one celebrity name in there, but the other one is just like, oh, we don't want celebrities in this case? And what the court will say is, it was good when the prosecution wants it, but when the defense wants it, it's a complete no-no. I can't give you a good reason. That's up to the judge. The phrase that we use is the judge is the gatekeeper of evidence.
Sean, thank you so much for breaking all of this down.
Thank y'all for having me. I much appreciate it.
That was Shaun Kent, criminal defense attorney from South Carolina, and that's it for this episode of Diddy on Trial from the BBC World Service YouTube channel with me, Anoushka Mutanda-Dougherty. Make sure you subscribe so you never miss a thing, and keep sending us those questions on WhatsApp at +44 330 123 551. That's +44 330 123 551.